Hey everyone, welcome to week 8 of Heart to Heart. This week we will be talking about chapter 8 of Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love, which is titled The Battle for Purity. So this week we're going to be talking a little bit more about chastity, but kind of dive deeper into the topic and discuss some other parts of chastity as a whole. So I'd like to start off with showing you a quote. I'd just like you to read this quote and then we'll come back and talk about it. So as we talked about last week, a lot of people see chastity as just not having sex. They don't really know the full meaning of it. So we know that part of chastity is not having sex, but not having sex until marriage. Chastity isn't just never having sex in your entire life, even if you're married. Like, that's not what it is. But that's the common misunderstanding of chastity these days. So many people take it the wrong way and think of chastity as a suppression of sexual desires, therefore making chastity become, as John Paul II says, one long no. However, chastity is actually a yes. It is a yes in our hearts to the other person, not just to his or her sexual values. And it's a yes that requires certain no's in order to protect love from falling into utilitarianism. A sexual relationship between two people who are not married is a lie, because it is devoid of the total lifelong commitment to each other as persons and the complete self-giving love that comes in marriage. So this is kind of an intense statement, but it is true. Any sexual relationship outside of marriage really is not a full union of two persons at all, because they're not committed to each other in the lifelong bondage of marriage. They're not committed to each other in any way, really, if they're not married. So that's why it's really one big lie, because they're not really they're engaging in an act that's supposed to bind them together in many different ways, but if they're not actually bound in the covenant of marriage, then it's a lie. So the word chaste literally means clean, and obviously you guys probably know why. But yeah, chaste literally means clean, because when we are chaste, when we are living chastely, we are free from all the sins that would take us away from that relationship with God, and we're free from those sexual sins that would have a damaging effect on all the rest of our relationships in our lives. And therefore, the opposite of clean is that. So chaste means clean, and you're clean of all of that. You're free from all of that. You're free from the sin that dirties your conscience and your heart and your mind. So I think that would be why it means clean. Alright, so in this chapter, St. John Paul II talks about the 6th and 9th commandments and the difference between them. So the 6th commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery. And the 9th commandment is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And it's kind of interesting that there are two commandments that are kind of talking about the same topic. So 2 out of the 10 commandments are really covering this topic in 2 different lights. So the difference between the 6th and 9th commandment is this. The 6th commandment addresses external physical actions in the realm of sex, and the 9th commandment addresses internal actions, commonly known as lustful thoughts. So, obviously, thou shalt not commit adultery. Adultery is an external act. Committing adultery with someone is clearly physical. It's of the body. And thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife is talking about having lustful thoughts about someone. Therefore, it's internal because it's your thoughts. But they're both sinful, so that's why they are commandments. So there are 3 stages in the battle against sexual egoism. And sexual egoism is the tendency to use another person for sensual pleasure. So now I'm just going to say that these are stages that people may go through and have the possibility of going through. These are not stages that people are definitely going to go through in their lives. These are stages that you go through. You can just go through the first, you can just go through the first and second, or you can go through all 3. It's basically stages leading up to committing a sexual sin. So therefore, not everyone goes through these. It's kind of weird that it's not a process that we go through. These are just stages that can happen to someone if they let themselves move towards sexual sin. So, the first stage in this battle is a spontaneous sensual reaction. So this is when you notice the sexual values of another person's body and react to those values spontaneously. The second stage is sensual concupiscence. So something within the person begins to stir, a desire for the sexual values of the other person's body as an object to enjoy. So as long as the will does not consent to these utilitarian desires, the person has not fallen into sin. These first 2 stages are simply are human ways of acting. It's not sinful. However, the third stage, carnal desire. The will gives up resisting and consents to pursuing the pleasurable feelings occurring within. And this is when a sexual sin is committed. So, basically, the stirring desires are not sins in and of themselves. It's when someone acts upon these desires when it becomes a sin. And again, like I said, these stages are not stages that people are definitely going to go through. They're stages that people may go through if they are moving towards committing a sexual sin. And like I said, you can stop after the second stage, and not move into the sinful part of these acts. You can stop yourself after the first stage. It's not this thing that you're definitely going to go through. These are just stages that people may go through if they are moving towards committing a sexual sin. Alright, just want to clear that up. Alright, so this week in Bible study, we read 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 2 through 15. And this is basically the story of David and Bathsheba. So, as many of you may know, this story talks about tells the story of David seeing Bathsheba on bathing from his window in another area of the palace that he's in or whatever. And he asks his servants about her and who is that? And they tell him who she is, and they specifically say she is the wife of Uriah. So she's obviously married. And then he ends up he basically goes through the stages that we just discussed. He sees her and has spontaneous sensual desires and a reaction towards her. And then he has a desire for her and for her body. And he doesn't stop there. He has them bring her to him and they commit adultery. And it's basically just showing that even that ancient story, it still does apply to us today. So David saw this beautiful woman and had a desire for her, and then he acted upon that desire. The way this applies today basically is in our world we have visual stimuli everywhere. On billboards, in commercials, in movies, TV shows, the internet, ads, magazines, you name it. We have visual stimuli everywhere. And it's for both men and women. It's not just for men, although there is a lot of that. And basically what we can learn from this is that it is important to put out these impure thoughts and emotions quickly before our desires take over. And that's not to say that, we see someone on a billboard and we immediately are going to seek that person out to, be with them or whatever. But it still can be sinful. The 9th commandment says that you shouldn't covet thy neighbor's wife. So even coveting someone, like wanting to have that person but knowing you can't, and being jealous of that and having lustful thoughts about that person, that's still a sin. So this story, even though it's from a long, long time ago and it's in the Bible, it still applies to us today. It just shows that the repercussions of acting upon sexual desires and ending up committing a sin. And then David did end up getting her pregnant. So that's not to say that that's always going to be the repercussions, but there are repercussions to these sins. Whether it's external or even internal, it can damage a person inside and cause them a lot of hurt and hardship later on. So the topic that we've been talking about today relates to emotional chastity as well. Now, emotional chastity is a huge topic in and of itself, but I'm just going to touch on a few of the points right now. So we have to be careful not to become emotionally attracted to someone who we are not in a relationship with or who we just met. So if we're in a relationship with someone, we can't just go around spilling our emotions to all these different people. Like, they aren't meant to know that and know the deepness of who we are. And we really have to guard our heart, especially if we're emotionally attaching ourselves to other people and we are dating someone at the same time. Is that really healthy for us? Probably not. Or if we're not even dating and we just have a small group of close friends or certain people who know a lot about us and who are close to us and who we trust and have built this friendship with, they know our emotions and they know how we feel about things. But if we just meet someone and we're emotionally attracted to them, or just spilling our emotions because we have, quote, no one else to talk to or whatnot, that can be dangerous too. So we have two options when this occurs. We can treat these feelings like impure thoughts and strive to prevent the emotional attraction from spinning out of control. Or we can give into the sentimental attraction and feed it. So, obviously the first choice is probably the better one, and it can really help us to guard our heart and keep ourselves from giving away parts of our life or parts of our mind or heart to other people who may not, who we may not even know or may not know well, or who we're still forming a friendship with, who we may not be completely friends with yet or know a lot about yet. And it's really important that we do that for ourselves, because we don't want all these people to know every single thing about us. So that's how it relates to emotional chastity. But like I said, emotional chastity is a huge topic in and of itself. So that's just touching on it. But yeah, so to wrap up, I just wanted to say that in the chapter, Dr. Shree says that Christ wants us to live single-heartedly. He wants our hearts to be completely united to Him. And if we end up getting married later on, to be completely united to Him and to our spouse. And that's it. We aren't to give away part of ourselves, either physically or emotionally, to any other person who God has not planned for us to give it to. So I just wanted to mention that because it is really important to remember that our hearts are meant for Christ and Christ alone, and then eventually for our spouse. They're not meant to be shared with anyone else in a physical action, in a sexual act, or emotionally. So to close, in Bible study this week, we read Philippians 4, verse 8. And after you read that, I just want you to think about this question, or answer this question for yourself. How can living the ideals mentioned in this verse help us in the battle for purity? So just think about that. It'll make more sense when you read it, but think about that and really try to understand how you can live out these things and live out this purity in your own life. And it's not called a battle for nothing. It is a battle. We have to fight to really protect our purity and have this purity in our lives. So it's definitely something that's hard, but it's worth fighting for in the end. It really is. So I hope you all enjoyed this week and this discussion, and I will see you next week when we discuss chapter 9. Thanks. Bye.